Everyone,
All right.
welcome to Disaster Podcaster. I think we're going to be on episode 14 today. Don't quote me on that. And man, I'm really excited about having my good friend Chris the Man Jeter on today. I don't think he needs an introduction, but I'm going to give you one anyway. Chris Jeter is 23 years in the restoration industry, across many different parts of the industry. He's done the big stuff. He's traveled regionally, nationally, internationally, worked on some large major areas, but he currently has decided to take all of the he's learned back to Abilene, Texas. And he and his incredible wife, Sharon, own a great Service Master. And I'm saying great because Service Master is great franchise, but inside of the franchise of Service Master, Chris probably has a very envious business, in my humble opinion, doing a whole lot of things right. Chris comes from a background of the love of building teams, military background, structure, training is very, very important to Chris. He really dives a lot into DISC personality profiles with his staff and with others, and just loves this industry and loves the people that are in it, trying to do the right thing. So I think anybody that's ever been able to spend some time with Chris, you probably will agree that he's very, very generous with his time, with his education, and shares that, again, with industry, with employees, and also locally in his own community. He's probably involved with as much or more than the community-driven things than a lot of people in their market. So really just growing a great business that's organic, marketing, reputation, doing everything else. But that's it, Chris. Did I leave anything off? I don't know your shoe size.
No, that was very humbling. Thank you.
Yeah, man.
Um, yeah, could have said it better. I wouldn't have said it better.
Yeah, you would have. So Chris and I been doing a lot of business together, industry business for a couple of years. We have a lot of the same drives, and I don't know why it took us so long to have you on. Probably because you've been so busy. I mean, you always get your hands in a couple different things, and you obviously think internally first, take care of the people you're supposed to take care of, whether it be family or employees. But I'm glad you finally decided to carve out some time, because I think this topic, this theme that I wanted us to cover today, not only is it a fun one, I think you have the experience to kind of add a lot of color to it, and what I hope will end up being a lot of takeaways for a lot of people. So don't be nervous. I see you're in the truck. I want everybody to know that Chris, he puts his money where his mouth is. He's out usually doing the stuff all over. Not only Abilene, you're also Midland, Odessa area, right? You have a location there. Yeah. It's a big area to
We've got
cover.
two locations.
You've got a big area.
25,000 square miles.
1,000 square miles. How many people is that in that part of Texas?
Actually, we are still under 600,000.
Okay.
So it's a large territory, not very populated, but we do more than a lot of big city operations. So
Yeah.
when you figure drive time, I mean, what it takes me to drive an hour, I can go 70 miles, versus someone in a big city, their hour drive can be a few blocks, with a
Yeah.
lot of traffic. So
It can be.
it's got its pros and cons.
Yeah. I also want to squash one thing that I learned many years ago from working closely with you. I think that there is a myth or a false belief in our industry that franchises are all program TPA oriented. Why don't you tell our friends and people that are listening approximately how much of your business, if any, derives from work from programs or TPAs?
Yeah, I mean, starting out in this industry can be a little difficult, especially if you don't have the systems or the know-how or the knowledge. So that's a lot of reasons why a company, a business owner may choose to join a franchise. There's some pros to it. You just have to weigh all the pros and cons. And for me, it wasn't about the lead generation or the brand awareness, name recognition, because the company that I bought already had that. But the main reason I chose to join the Service Master family was because of the support I get. It doesn't matter what time of day. I can call at 2 o'clock in the morning, or I can call first thing in the morning. I can call 5 in the afternoon. All it takes is one phone call from me, and whatever I need, I get. So that was my reason behind doing it. And I am different than most franchises. Right now, we currently sit at 5.4% of my work is TPA, or basically corporate, right? Because every franchise is a TPA because they have contracts with different insurance companies, and so we're very proud of that. The fact, because I don't like someone else being responsible for my income. That's on me to do.
Yeah.
As a business owner, it's my job to make sure my people stay busy, and if I let someone else do it and something goes wrong, my hands are tied.
Yeah.
If 90% of my work is EPA, and of that, half of it's, let's just say, farmers, and corporate for whatever reason loses that contract, there goes 40% of my business.
Yeah.
Well, 40% of my business goes, guess what else goes? My team,
Yeah.
those families. I mean, so just a different mindset. So
Yep.
yeah, we don't do a lot of program work.
And I
I'm
didn't
proud
bring
of
that
it.
up to
I do
be, I didn't bring that
mind
up
a
to
little
be,
bit.
sorry. I didn't bring that up to be like, let's start piling on top of program vendors. That's not what I was saying. I just wanted to, I think your reasoning to choose not to do that work is great. And I agree with you that when you're first starting out, you need cash sales. It starts the engine. The goal is to, how do I move to a place like you mentioned where you've got my castle? I'm building my business. I'm building my company, my brand, and my programs. And then, you have full control over it. And then you get to a point where I know that I'm in with my business, and I was with my restoration company. I liked picking who I do work with. Sometimes you don't have that choice when you're under some kind of SLA, but I'm not here to pile on. I just thought I hear a lot of people in our industry kind of put a wall between independent and franchise. And I don't call independent of the color of the van. I think it's your mindset of how you run a business and how you grow a business. So I love that. I mean, I think, listen, 5.6, even 8 to 10 is sometimes what I say. That's controllable. That's not enough to make a big dent in your business, because it's going to be a little lower margin just because the cost of acquisition. But that's not what I wanted our call to be about today. I just wanted to kind of like knock that out. People that say Pro Service Master, blah, blah, blah. So I had a fun topic, Chris, that I love to talk about. I've taught about this a little bit in some of my large loss classes, and it's kind of called the disaster after the disaster. And what that means, so that we can kind of set the stage for this, is in our restoration remediation world, we're usually only called in when there's something wrong, and it's always a disaster. And we might not think it's that major, but usually the insured, the homeowner, the customer, it's probably the first time they've dealt with it, or at least this magnitude. And to them, it is a disaster. So I like to use the word disaster on an evolving scale. But sometimes we'll take these jobs on and they get worse, or incidents happen, or a sequence of incidents that make it worse, that make, and I like to say, we cause disasters inside of disasters. And that conversation, when I've had a live workshop, that usually brings up some great examples. And I thought we would have a few of those that we can each share today. And I'll start off. I think what's fair is we try to leave, especially if we were working for someone else, because we both have worked for some national and international companies, we're going to leave the company name out of it, and if possible, employees' names, and keep it kind of generalized. But I've got a lot, but I think the few that stick out, and I want everyone to know that this is me exposing that I'm as human or more human than a lot. And when you play hard, when you play big, you fail big too. And you've got to get used to it, and you've got to be okay with it, because on the other side of it, there's an opportunity to learn something, to never do it again. You good with that, Chris? You good with that whole, you got some of those in your,
Oh
in your
yeah,
brain?
man. If the walls could talk, right? We
Yeah.
definitely both have great stories, and a lot of them.
Yeah.
Well, maybe some not so great, but definitely learning points for us.
What's funny is they're not great at the time. At the time, you think your world's
No.
over, but then a day or two goes by, a week or two goes by, and then now years go by. And we're on a podcast talking about them almost in a humorous way, but
Yeah.
it really
Once the
sucked at the
pain
time.
of financing that mistake or that disaster goes by, then it's funny and some definitely we can learn from.
Yeah.
But in the meantime, yeah, it kind of sucks.
So I got one, Chris, that this is probably my first, this one hurt because I was so invested and I was ready to say we had done nothing wrong in this job and this happened. So this was, this was late 2000s, 8 or 9, somewhere, or maybe 10, Atlanta, Georgia, a commercial fire at a kind of a warehouse manufacturing structure. Probably it was ended up being $700,000 project. We had to do 2 shifts because of business interruption. They needed to get back open quicker. We couldn't, it just wasn't enough space to throw bodies into it. So it was working days and night. And I was a director, and we had a daytime assistant project manager and a nighttime. Well, I obviously I think I actually got called out of town once or twice, but I was more present during the day. Just like anything, that's the shift when the owners are there, when your adjusters and your consultants and they're all stakeholders. That's when the show is on and everybody's there. Nobody comes at nighttime after they've eaten. They just like, oh, whatever. So daytime was running great. Nighttime wasn't appearing to be an issue. So we ran this job, completed it. We'd given a great reserve. We had a few change orders. I want to say we were around 600,000. We'd gotten our deposit on the job. We'd gotten one progressive payment or, in the middle. And I was trying to collect the rest of it. It was so-and-so insurance. And I knew the adjuster. We did a lot of work together, and I called him up and said, where's it at? Where's it at? And he goes, still kind of stuck, going through some things. Like, he's stalling more than normal. There's stall, but this guy's stalling more than normal. So I just kind of put down a demand, sent him a big, ugly email and said, we have payment by now or this happens, lien, whatever that was. And he emailed me back, or he called me. He said, Clark, why don't we have lunch over by Perimeter Mall? And this was kind of convenient for both of us. He said, let's have lunch. And I want to talk to you about this. And I was like, if that's what it takes, man, I'm always down to eat something. Let's go. We go sit down, and I was ready for bear. I said, so did you bring a check? And he's like, I think I want to pause that conversation, Clark. He goes, I want to show you something. And he had the client with us, the guy that owned the business that I knew, but from the fire, and he was there and just thought we were just going to hash a few things out. They always say, what about this? He opens his laptop, pushes play, and there is a packaged up video that they had gotten from CCTV cameras in the business that were not affected and still running. And we knew they were there. It's not like we were doing anything wrong. But he's like, I want to show you a couple things and just wait till the end to say something. I'm like, that little knot in my stomach was bowling up. And he started showing a video of our nighttime APM sleeping over in the corner on top of some boxes, lollygagging, dancing or doing something like it. There was no sound. There was just video, and it looked like he was like cutting a rug and dancing or whatever. And then there was another one out in the back dock where he had his vehicle pulled up, and I think they time lapsed it. It was like 2 hours, 3 hours where he was detailing his vehicle, and he had 2 or 3 other of our supplemental labor out there helping, and supervisors were in and out. Everybody was on the back dock smoking. He's like, looks like your nighttime guy didn't probably do his job, and we could probably point to a lot of inefficiency and wasted labor and time there. So what we're going to do is we've prepared an alternative number to pay you to finish off, minus all of his time, his travel, all associated costs. And then we decided that about 20% of the nighttime labor hours, which they've aggregate pulled that out, should be taken off. I had no response for that, and I had no dispute. I was like, sounds fair. Disaster. We calls a disaster off of a seamlessly good job. Now, I didn't do that, but I'm responsible. So I have to take ownership, extreme ownership. So the thing was, the oldest lesson I think I've ever learned, Chris, was it's not what you expect, it's what you inspect. While you don't want to
Yep.
micromanage, you need to make sure that people are being held accountable. This person didn't have a reputation, didn't have a string of occurrences that this seemed to be a common thing. But now I have to wonder if that's how he did this on all jobs, right? And so in any way, it probably cost us $45,000, 50. So
Wow.
almost 10% of that job, which is profit, right? Gone.
Yep.
Myself
Yep.
and the other APMs didn't make any payoff of it. So what's each one of these lessons I think is good for takeaway? What is that taken away? There has to be, you have to tell people, I think you're probably going to do an amazing job if you're working for me, but I don't want you to feel bad if I just check, because I might see something you don't see. But people have to know there's some consequences, and that there's some supervision and some oversight of things. And since then, I've had those talks about, you're working at night, pretend that you're going to be talking to a jury one day, trying to tell people we're worth what we're charging. And that's it. That's the speech I have with everybody moving on. And even today, always pretend that one day you'll say, ladies and gentlemen of the jury. And it usually makes you step up and do something. But that was not a fun day to call corporate and tell them that we didn't make margins on this good job for our market. And of course, we had to work twice as hard for the rest of the quarter to find new work to make up for it, because we had a number that we were responsible
Yep.
for. So that was a pretty big disaster. Do you have any
Yeah, definitely.
any
So,
come
oh
any
yeah, I
come to
mean,
your mind?
well, we both could tell. I'm gonna break it down a little bit, smaller scale, because not everyone who listens to your podcast are
No.
big companies, and so I have one in particular that I remember very well, just because, man, it was one of my first ones as a business owner, not just a PM or an APM or even a supervisor. Um, and it's mind-boggling to this day how it happened, but it goes to show that these things are going to happen. No matter how good you are, no matter how much you train, things are going to come up. And the lesson of them all is, how are you going to address it, and how are you going to step up and take care of it? And so this was a very small, matter of fact, it was on our services side. It was a tile and grout cleaning, small kitchen area, nothing big. It's like $237 job, nothing at all. Guy was supposed to be in and out, hour and a half, 2 hours, be done. Well, he did a great job cleaning the floor, and then he identified some problems with the grout line. They were still dark, and he knew he could get them cleaner. So he went back to the truck and brought out the acid, and this is where things started to go wrong. He did everything great up until then, and then he grabbed the acid. Instead of mixing it out at his truck, he goes inside the home and mixes it in the customer's stainless steel sink. Well, that was problem number one. Then he goes to spraying the floor and using a normal pump up type sprayer. Well, he had all stainless steel appliances. And when you're spraying that with a normal pump up type sprayer, you're going to get splatter. So, what do you think happened to the stainless steel fridge, stainless steel oven, stainless
Mm.
steel dishwasher? I mean, this is for a $200 job. This wound up being just over a $4,000 mistake. And I'm like, holy crap. How can this happen? I've got these guys all over town doing these kind of things. It just goes, it makes you wonder what's going on. And even the best of us have some of these horror stories. But the lesson from these things is, man, I got a call saying, hey, I need a supervisor over here. The guy was not very happy. And my guy that normally took care of it just wasn't having a good feeling about this. So he wanted me to come along. And I'm like,
Mhm.
no problem. I'm going to come along with you. We show up. Guy starts showing us all the things that went wrong. And I'm like, yeah, you're right. There's no excuse. We did this. We're going to fix it. Um, and to this day, that has been, I mean, the way we took care of it was awesome, because this wound up, but by me fessing up to this, that is my responsibility, our responsibility, the company's responsibility. Um, our technician made a mistake, and we fessed up and decided, hey, we're going to get this taken care of, and we did. Everything went perfectly. And at the end of this, he turned out to be one of our best subcontractors, and it resulted in thousands and thousands of dollars,
Yeah.
hundreds of thousands that we made because of that relationship that wasn't supposed to be a relationship in most people's minds. This was a disaster, and you screwed up. And our first inclination is to deny, because you can't expect that of our people, man. They're good people, they're honest people, and they've been trained, but things
Yeah.
are going to happen. So that's one
Wow.
of my favorite stories that I tell.
That's a good
Just
one.
by stepping up and admitting the fault, because there was no other way to handle that. I mean, it was clearly our issue. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, I mean, so I just wanted to break it down a little bit smaller scale for some of those others that might be watching it, just one, two
Sure.
man trucks. Doesn't matter what size you are, or what size job is, you're going to have these issues. And one, how do you handle it? And two, what are you learning from it? So,
Well, I think the whole topic is relative. If it's a small job, you have smaller margins for error. It's going to hurt you more the bigger a big
yep.
job, arguably, that job didn't sink because I lost 8% and 8.5%. But a $237 job, you only are making a little bit. Again, you're probably not doing as much for the profit as you are for the relationship for the long term. But man, when you
Yep.
talked about the reciprocity of that mistake, and what an incentive to latch on to the core value a lot of people have, doing the right thing always, no matter what. My background, Chris, was in the dry cleaning business, and this is something I brought to this industry. Anyone, dry cleaning and laundry. So people used to actually wear more two-piece suits, and you buy those as a matching set, and they would bring their suits to us, and sometimes they're cleaned separately. So in dry cleaning, it's a solvent, and there's not supposed to be water in the solvent. If it does, it causes shrinking. Well, sometimes a seal, a gasket, or something broke, and water got into it. There are some garments, and I know I'm getting real detailed, are not supposed to get wet, especially if they have wool. Well, our industry in dry cleaning is not so different than restoration. There's a section of people who say, in your case, the damage that happened to that equipment is just a byproduct of you having me out here, or especially if it's insurance. It got ruined because I'm here, and we're going to put that on the claim. That's not the right thing to do. That's not, we made a mistake. We need to own it. So we would dry clean suits, and we might ruin the pants, or we might burn them with the press or the iron, and have to tell the customer, says, well, your suit, we ruined the pants. There are lots of dry cleaners who would say, well, I'll buy you a new pair of pants, but you can't find a matching set for that suit. You owe them for a suit. Well, there's no way I'm paying for both. I didn't ruin the jacket. You ruined the suit. And I think that in our business approach, my dad taught me this. You owe them a suit. You buy them a suit. You get mad about it if you want to, but don't get mad at the customer who trusted you to do it right. Get mad at yourself for letting it happen. But you're right. On a smaller scale, I have one of those. This was a year ago. A client of mine in Arkansas had a team go out and do a water damage, a clean water break. It was a washing machine in a laundry room, and they did the work. They had to pull out the washer and dryer to do the baseboards and mitigation behind it, extraction, clean it. And they told the customer that we'll be able to push the washer and dryer back up. But then when they got back there, they found more microbial growth. The job kind of expanded, and they told the customer that, blah, blah, blah. They pushed it back in, but they didn't put the drain hose for the washer back in the back of the washing machine. And the customer that night, 8:00, my house was reflooding. 12 gallons of water are all over my room because you guys told me I could use my washer and dryer, but you didn't put that hook in there. They caused a disaster that was beyond and bigger and different than the disaster the customer caused. So they had to go out middle of the night, re-extract, re-clean, upset, keep everybody up a little bit later. So it's really, really, really bad. Another one, Chris, that this one's embarrassing. And this one is still talked about when I get around a certain group of people. This was pretty sizable job. It doesn't really matter. And we had a really difficult adjuster that no, actually it was a consultant. It was a third-party consultant for the insurance industry. We knew him, just didn't like our company. He didn't mind me, but he just didn't like our company, and like a referee on a team. Doesn't hate the players. He just wants to kind of get after the coach. So we had a really rough day of a lot of bickering and arguing scope, and me reminding him that his job was not to tell us how to do the job, and his was the cost code it and whatever. That night, we had a process where we're supposed to, this is when I was a project manager. We're supposed to put together our daily burn, daily field report, let all stakeholders know. And we had a couple of emails. We had one that went out to all stakeholders of the entire project, and then an internal. Well, I'm typing this up, and I type that the so-and-so is such an asshole. And I hit reply to all. And it went to all, including the so-called asshole. Well, it was not only 6 minutes later, I'm getting text from all my peers and coworkers, the owner of my company, but also from that person says, I'm the best asshole you'll deal with all day. But the owner of my company called and said, Clark, that was bad. You're right. He kind of can tend to be that way, but we don't put that in writing, and you certainly need to be diligent about sending that over. So that was just a lesson to me that I caused a disaster. And the rest of the job was just while it was a little funny, it was definitely tense. And my professionalism was in question by the customer, that I was using that kind of language and acting in such a way. So that was a disaster that I caused from letting my emotions do that. So a little bit different than some of the other disasters people always refer to when we talk about this, but that one felt like a career-ending disaster that night. I felt like going home early. I'll wonder where else I can work.
Yep. Look at that. These are all learning experiences, man. It's nobody starts out perfect. I remember back in my younger days, man, 3 or 4 years in the industry, I thought I knew it all. Everything was gung ho. I was a badass. And I mean, I remember people not wanting to associate with me that worked at a former company because of my ego, because of my demeanor, I guess. And and then you start looking back as you get older, and you're like, man, I was a little cocky then, or I was a little arrogant, and then you start looking at all the things that happen to get you where you are today, and you start reflecting back. We have a job where big project, I was on it, had a lot of laborers, probably close to 100. And I mean, that's not a lot compared to some scales, but this was a good sized job, 6-story building. And man, we were getting towards the end of the job, and we had to build some units, just to do some minor touch-ups on each floor. There were 6 stories, and one of the supervisors had 20 temps, and their job was to set up containments. And we had gone through a class about it. But man, it doesn't matter how much of a class you go through, when spray adhesive is involved, man, I could tell you something's going to go wrong. So a group of guys, a group of temps, grabbed some spray adhesive and some tape and some plastic, and started hitting all the elevator shafts, sealing all those areas off. Well, what they had done is they'd taken the spray adhesive and started spraying the stainless steel, and then slapping the plastic up there. And they were given the task to do it, and they were shown how to do it, but they got creative and they thought they had a better way of doing it. And they come back like 30 minutes later and saying, hey, we're all done. And I just happened to be with the supervisor at that time. I was like, man, those guys are good. That was quick. Let's go check this out. What did they do? Holy crap. Yeah. So another one of those big learning lessons of, man, that's not what that's designed to be for. You don't spray adhesive plastics to stainless steel. That was a huge job cost for us. especially having the labor to go back and remove every bit of it without damaging the stainless steel, because that would have cost even more. So,
Right.
the stainless steel that wraps around the walls of the elevator and it opens the doors. I mean, gosh,
Yeah,
painful.
you could take the finish off of that pretty easily. That's a big
Oh
one.
yeah.
What what was the if you peel the onion back, what caused that to happen? What was the breakdown in the process of your company, in your job lineup? What was that about?
Lots of things, lots of things. Man, there's so many lessons to learn just from that one incident there. Your labor to supervisor ratio. Man, that was a big thing. Why did this supervisor have so many? Why was he working multiple floors when he couldn't directly supervise them? Why couldn't we bring in more supervisors and split that crew up? There were so many questions that could be asked and needed to be answered before the next project, the next opportunity like this came up. That was one. To this day, personally, if I'm running a job, there's no spray adhesive on the job site.
Yeah.
I just We're going to use tape. we Tape is a lot cheaper than any mess up. So I have methods in place. My guys still today, hey man, we really like it. It would go a lot quicker, whatever you can afford. But I'm going to tell you this story. And as long as you can make sure these kind of things don't happen, then that's up to you. That's what I pay you for. Go
Yeah.
do it. I personally, when I'm running a job, I don't want to deal with that. So I keep it off. And then lowering down the supervisor to labor ratio. That's a big thing.
What do
So
Chris, what do you like for a ratio for if anyone gets in a situation where they've got a job like this, and they will, I think anyone here that's really trying will eventually get that call that's a little different than their techs and their supervisors. What's your
yeah,
ratio generalization? I know there's caveats, but what do you like?
man, there's so many things. If I'm on a commercial job and I'm up on the roof and there's no place for them to go, yeah, you can send me 40 guys because
Mm,
I don't have to worry about them leaving and I can pretty much see everybody. So in that kind of situation, hey, that's okay. But if you're on a floor and you're working a part of the floor and it's not open and you can't see, you need to keep things within the line of sight. If not line of sight, at least working offices or rooms, bedrooms, or the same side of the house. You
mm,
need to be able to properly manage that team,
mm,
supervise that team. One of the biggest things I say, if your idea of being a supervisor is standing around just barking orders, you're not doing it right. Your job is to keep them working and moving and check their work before they go to another area and show them the processes and show them how you do it. You
yeah.
need a runner? Great. Get you some guy to run and get stuff for you, but you don't leave. You don't
Mm,
leave those guys unattended.
yeah.
Okay. So it all depends. I'm working residential. I kind of like the 4 to 5 to 1 if I'm dealing with
Hmm.
contents. If the house is empty, then I can go to a 7 or 8.
Yeah.
Um, you know, but on a commercial job, man, there's a lot of variables. You could have
Yeah.
anywhere from 2 to 20 be reasonable. I was just being sarcastic about being on a roof. I mean, I've been there and I started the day with 20 every day on that roof, but somehow I ended every day with 40 because everyone who wasn't doing their job down below got sent up to me on the roof. And man, they were in Tyvek suits in Louisiana and they were sweating their butt off every day, all day long because this is the middle of summer too. So it was not fun,
No.
So
Yeah, I'm with you. I think my default is 1 to 10, but there's a true assessment. Like, look at what we're doing. Are we, what's the reasonability? And then there's OSHA. There's what exposures do we have, that what can be caught up with, and when those change. But you just don't
yep,
want, it's like a military. One person really just needs to be responsible for X number of people. And you just need to branch down. That's so true. And don't worry about, people say, oh, well, who will pay for that? You'll pay for it if you do it wrong. The cost
yep,
is what it causes. And I think a client that sees you making smart decisions based off ratios or the correct distribution of supervision versus work. If you know what you're doing and you know what gets the best results, your customer is going to follow that lead because you're the expert in that thing. So, there's a couple more, Chris. This was Katrina again. Guys, everybody forget talking. I'm just not throwing out big jobs or something, but this was in the Garden District. It was a Hilton Garden hotel that was, pretty blasted, like also Katrina. It was groundwater flood, a little bit of damage from the wind that came through, but not much. And we had a desiccant and we had a generator. And Katrina was a mess. We don't have to even talk about that story. I mean, you're talking about people running on fumes, literally. Our fueling company couldn't get fuel locally, and they were, I believe, going all the way back to probably Lake Charles, but maybe even Houston. And they were shuttling jockeying. So most of our fuel truck drivers, bless their hearts, still some of my good friends, their guys were working 30 hours straight. The DOT stuff had been lifted and everybody was just trying to get things done. And one night, this was I had like 19 projects going on. And one of the project managers called me at 9:30, 10 o'clock. I was done with paperwork. I was winding down to watch some sports or whatever. And he's like, I got a problem over at the so-and-so at the Hilton Garden. And I said, what is it? He goes, diesel fuel everywhere. I'm like, what happened? He said, well, the driver was filling up the generator, the fuel cell is on site, and fell asleep and kept pumping, flooded the parking lot, the adjacent street, the business next to it, back into the building. And it was a disaster after disaster. Now, what could I have done with that? I don't know. I would have never predicted that. That was not in my planning phase that was ever going to happen. So that's not, I wouldn't say this. We didn't beat ourselves up, but we had to do the remediation of the concrete that was soaked in, the cleanup. We had to call out HEPACO to do some of the cleanup. It was a mess and it was expensive. Obviously that was subrogated back. The responsibility kind of fell on the fuel company, but we had to deal with the owner of the business and all the other 7 or 8 properties we were doing for them, because now we look like amateurs. So, these are the disasters after disasters. But I think what you and I were talking about before we started is when it's happening, we just want to crawl inside of our shell and just disappear. But here we are years later talking about it in a educational way, in a, I think if I personally, Chris, Drew, the takeaway of what most of these occurrences are started by is communication. I think that it's often breakdown in communication, and then of course process/training a process. So like you have to, and I write blogs, I do podcasts about processes and systems because I believe that they can alleviate a lot of human error when you have a process that's trained well to create a consistent outcome. And I think that our industry feels that since we do something different so often that we can't create any. And I think you're wrong. I think you can create some and then train on them, just like the military. How do we train for the worst thing? Because we're only as strong as our weakest link, right? And it's those times that they pop up. So I really, really, really want to urge everyone, where do you start? You start with the process that you need, that you do the most often, or that you see the failure most often. Guys leave and go to a job without everything from the shop, and they've got all this wasted time of driving back, especially if you live where Chris does and you drive 70 miles. You're either going to buy it, cost more money, or you're going to go back to the shop or send someone back. That's just from improper planning. What are we going to do? What are we expected? What will we need to do it? And then what's 10% more just in case we get out there? But we cause our own disasters, whether it's accident or it's poor planning. You can split those hairs all you want to, but I think, Chris, and I think you'll agree, they are going to happen. And the more you try to avoid them, maybe the more they will happen. You can't prep for everything, and you just have to go into everything, eyes open, communicating with all parties, preparing for things, and then having good people who report quickly and are creative and say, we stopped the flood. I mean, have you ever had a fire at a job that you were doing cleanup? We've had a power cords. I think it was an air mover.
Yeah, we got one actually that just happened a couple of months ago. We're on a apartment complex. Roofer called us out, who's a good friend of mine and also a tenant in my facility here. And he's like, "Hey, Chris, man, the roof blown off. Storm came through. I need you down here." We went down there, started drying everything out. Uh, go back the next day, and I mean, there is just smoke barreling out of one of these units. There's 8 units total.
Wow.
I'm like, what the heck? And call the fire department and everything. One of our air movers burned up. What do you
Yeah.
do?
Yeah.
You know, it's hey, okay, this is a pretty big deal. I'm going to go ahead and file with my insurance and let them handle it because I've got a client here. I've got a friend here who's we're actually working for. Um, let's just do the right thing. I'm not going to sit here and argue whose fault it is or whatnot. I'm gonna file it with my insurance. They're going to take care of it because it was actually, I was hired by the roofer, but his insurance was paying for the job. And
Mm.
then since he hired me, we caused some more damage. And so, I mean, this is a whole nightmare. You got the building owner's insurance, you got the roofer's insurance. Now you got my insurance involved.
And
You
they're
know,
all going to sue each
you
other.
just can't stand for
Subrogation.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So rather than us battle it out, that's why we have it. Let them
Yeah.
battle it out. And in the end, I'm sure it'll all work out. But you know,
There are people
learning
employed that
lessons in every.
there are people employed at that insurance company that's their job is subrogation claims, and they go after and
Yeah.
cause an effect. So we had I think it was an air scrubber that caught fire, but it wasn't. It was the cause and origin took a look at it, and the end of the extension cord, a new Home Depot plug had been put on, one of the round kind. Those don't exist. You don't have those on jobs. That's not applicable for a commercial job. Those have to be cut up, thrown in the dumpster, and getting rid of, and then document in your file. But that was a thing. And then I think another takeaway on this, Chris, we used to have after action reports after every project depending on the scale of the job. There was a templated meeting that we had on what went well, what didn't, what did we learn. And then of course, if there was an individual incident like that, that's a whole nother meeting. But what did we do that we could have prevented that? Was it a communication thing or blah, blah, blah. And
Yep.
so, yeah. And I mean, we've had jobs where we
Yeah,
had
you can't hide it.
we had distribution cable and everyone kept running over it. We didn't have a ramp. Everyone kept running over until they finally cut it. And it was, we caused damage to how expensive that stuff is. We had to replace that.
Yeah.
So everything's a cause and effect. What were you going to say?
I was going to say, and I've worked for many different companies, and a lot of these companies, they want to try and hide all this and make it seem like it didn't happen. And I'm like, look, this is a learning experience. It's nothing to be ashamed of. Even if it is something stupid and we made a mistake, well, hey, let's make sure no one else does this stupid mistake. But share it, learn from it. Don't try and hide it and conceal it. And pride is a big enough issue in our industry.
Yeah.
We don't need this too. From a customer standpoint, it looks shady when that happens. I could have easily just said, "Hey, that's not my fault," and that's my first inclination. My first thing, couldn't be, man. We use these air movers all the dang time. And matter of fact, I'd said that a couple of times, but it wasn't. Hey, well, this is your problem, not mine. It wasn't my equipment, but you owe me for my equipment, and I'm going to charge your insurance company for it. Don't go down that route. Just
No.
hey, look, man, it's I'll go ahead and file with my insurance. We'll let those people sort it out. I'm still here to help. What can I do? Well, we need to get those units up and running. Okay, well, let's get them up and running, and we'll file. We'll put our bill together and figure out which insurance company it goes to, and because they need to get back into business as well. So,
yeah,
don't compound a problem by trying to hide it. And just want to make sure I threw that out there because I see a lot of that.
There's a saying, I think it goes, problems don't go away with silence. So if something happened and you ignore it, it doesn't get better. It just gets worse. But I think all that's true, Chris. And again, you just told us your first story was a relationship came from you owning the mistake and doing it right. And I think I certainly can relate to being a customer of a business and a chef or a waiter come out and say, we ruined your meal. We dropped it. So it's on us. The fact that they just didn't say, we're going to make you wait and you're going to wait. you're going to have to wait. Would you like to wait? Would you like us to make you another one, or is your time valuable? And they say, we're just going to comp you and blah, 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 or give you a credit for next time, or whatever that is. And I'm like, that's above and beyond. And that's what you really want. And that's what people expect from us. So I hope that's what people say. But the after action on this podcast is prepare just as best you can. Ask yourself the things that we do most often. What is our exposure? Or use some real life cases where we always forget things, or we always back our trailers. That's one of them. People backing trailers up. That's not easy. A lot of people don't drive trucks with trailers. Have a workshop, train people to do that until that they've proven to you. But those are steps before the disaster. But listen, it's we don't think in terms that we're so busy trying to stay busy and get to work and cover what we have, but you have to block some time to practice. It's like a football team does, like the Cowboys. And they may not win, but they practice during the week so they can play well.
Don't bring that up right now.
Sorry, maybe we'll cut that out.
That's a love-hate relationship right there.
Yeah, no, it's I think football teams always, and listen, I'm sure a football team would have plenty of their own disasters that they could talk about. But I just want everyone to know that most of the things that have happened to you on your job, or that will happen in the next couple of weeks, months, and years, somebody else has had it happen the same thing. I mean, we've done this while we're a new industry, there's lots of occurrences. We've all done it. We've failed mold jobs. We've had people not show up. Subs don't show up on a job. It's a disaster. It kind of affects everybody else. And tell your customer up front, we're going to work really hard to make sure everything goes right, but we know that something could go wrong, but it's how we handle that. It's what I hope you remember the most. And usually a rational customer would attach to that. But yeah, we've had some real disasters. I've left some of them out that I kind of had my head getting ready for this, and it would go on too long, but some of them are really embarrassing, but they are so irrelevant. But I think the little ones that we have make us think that those are going to end our company, but they're just not. Just take them, act like it happens every once in a while, and just move along. And the customer will be like, okay, you're calm, I'm calm, we're good. And make it right. Yep. So what's
we got enough stress in our life. We don't need any more.
That's true. Don't bring in demons that weren't invited. Man, I hope what do you think the winter's going to be like in Texas this year? You expecting a big winter?
I'm expecting a wet one, so we'll see. We've been finally getting some rain. I know we're going a week without anything on the radar right now, but according to Farmer's Almanac, might have a wet one, which means maybe a snowy one. The hot and cold is so unpredictable. I don't really follow that as far as the almanac's concerned, because we've had dry years and it's been extremely cold and we've been extremely warm. So, but the wet and the dry is really what we follow. So if we're going to have a lot of moisture, we have chance for snow, cooler temperatures, and we'll see how it goes out here in West Texas. I am praying that it is not like 2021. I don't mind going to a disaster zone, but I don't like one in my backyard.
That was a lot.
That's just too much to handle, and that was overwhelming. So I know how I feel for those people that have disasters happening right there in their hometown, because that was my first major one. It was the first time I actually had to turn people away and say, sorry, I can't help you. I'm putting you on the list, and when I get around to it, I'll come take care of you. But there just wasn't enough resources to take care of everybody. So I like the smaller ones, like last year. Unfortunately, my guys worked through Christmas and New Year's. It's the first time in 11 years we had to work both holidays. And but it was just 72 hours in the lower teens. Bam. It was just enough for us to get extremely busy for a good few weeks. And then we all recouped for a couple of days before normal business started coming about again. So those are the ones I prefer. 3 or 4 of those during the winter months are enjoyable and doable. Cool. But the big 2021 now,
that was something different.
I could do without that for a couple more years.
Yeah, that was wild. Well, man, listen, Chris Jeter, you said a lot. I appreciate you choosing to come on with me today. Everyone, find Chris Jeter if you're in Texas, especially, to see if you could ever get half an hour of his time, 10 minutes of his time, and we were in Austin a few weeks ago together, and we sat with a bunch of restorers, and this is how we grow. I'm better because of people like Chris, and I think everybody else could do the same thing. So find someone to latch onto like Chris, see who Chris hangs around with. It's a good chance that that's probably also your people. But man, I appreciate you for getting on here today. I hope it was fun for you. It was for me. And I think people will take some things away from it.
I hope they do. It's good seeing you, Clark.
All right, buddy. Take care of yourself.
Thank you. Bye bye.